The Odyssey 1 spaceship is on a mission to Titan, Saturn's moon, to gather natural resources for Earth. Since the journey lasts several years, the crew remains in hibernation for most of it, waking up every 90 days for routine checks and maintenance. After 9 months of travel, John wakes up to the usual alerts from the AI about potential side effects of their hibernation drug, like disorientation and nausea. He tries to recover, but is quickly ordered by Captain Franks to get to work. After a quick shower, John joins Captain Franks and Nash for system checks. They receive a message from Earth wishing them happy holidays and reminding them to complete their psychological evaluations. John checks his private inbox but is disappointed to find no messages. He begins thinking about his girlfriend Zoe, a thought that lingers during his psych evaluation. When asked what he misses most, John answers fresh air and later confesses to Nash that he forgot Zoe's last name. Nash reassures him, saying such confusion is normal after hibernation. This memory triggers the recollection of the day he met Zoe at a party, helping him remember her last name. Feeling more at ease, John continues with maintenance work. The trio sends a report to Earth confirming everything is on track and then returns to their hibernation pods. As John drifts off to sleep, he recalls the second time he saw Zoe during a presentation on the Titan mission. The video explained how the spaceship would slingshot around Jupiter on its way to Titan, where the resources would be used for clean energy, a solution to Earth's environmental damage. When John wakes up again, he makes sure to eat well and exercise. While working, he hears a voice calling his name and follows it, only to find nothing. Suddenly, the ship shakes violently and the lights flicker. The eye sends a warning as screws fall from the ceiling and one of the panels becomes dislodged and hits John in the head, knocking him out. He dreams of Zoe crying before regaining consciousness. Franks and Nash check on him, but they are unsure of what caused the damage, as John was the only one awake at the time. John inspects the area and finds that the ship's internal components have sustained significant damage. After reviewing the exterior video feeds, they notice part of the hull is damaged but find no evidence of the impact. The system shows no error messages from Earth either. They reset the power and everything appears normal. Franks decides to inspect the damage further while John records a message for Earth. As he does, he reflects on the time he and Zoe spent together at a cafe, discussing his lack of family and why he was selected for the Titan mission. Franks concludes that since the ship seems to be operating normally and no immediate danger is apparent, they should continue as planned. Nash disagrees, suggesting the ship could be under structural stress and in danger of decompression. John refuses to believe it, particularly since Zoe helped design the ship. Nash suggests that the mission could result in an explosion when they perform the slingshot maneuver. Franks insists they proceed with repairs and continue until they hear otherwise from Earth. As they work, John recalls the night he visited Zoe at her home, where they shared an intimate moment together. Later, Nash tries to convince John to wake up a day early to perform the slingshot in reverse, allowing them to return to Earth. John refuses, calling it mutiny. Desperate, Nash shares a story about an Antarctic base where a commander threatened to kill anyone attempting to evacuate during a crisis, ultimately leading to the deaths of the crew members. John reluctantly agrees to help Nash, but only if they find clear evidence of damage when they wake up next. As John falls asleep with a new timer, he thinks back to his final months on Earth, enjoying private moments with Zoe while maintaining a professional demeanor during Titan lectures. The next time he wakes up, he thinks he sees Zoe aboard the ship, but soon realizes it's just a hallucination. Nash arrives and says it's another reason they should go home. The two of them check the bridge for any updates from Earth but find nothing. They admire the beauty of Jupiter, and John announces that he no longer wants to follow Nash's plan. This sparks an argument interrupted by Captain Franks, who reveals he's also woken up early and overheard their discussion. Franks sends Nash to work, warning him of the consequences of disobedience. Later, Franks asks John if they're friends and shares a drink with him. He promises that if they find real evidence of danger, he will immediately abort the mission. Meanwhile, Nash, feeling increasingly paranoid, confronts John, trying to convince him to help. John refuses, but Nash becomes frantic, shouting about the ship's damage. At that moment, Franks arrives and asks if they can still perform the slingshot without Nash. John confirms that the calculations are already in the system, and Franks proceeds to handle the situation, threatening Nash with consequences for his insubordination. As the mission continues, John grows more distracted by thoughts of Zoe. He takes a break in a dark room, trying to clear his mind. Later, when inspecting the damage panel again, he discovers more electrical malfunctions. While examining the area, a gadget malfunctions and begins ejecting sparks, and the hole cracks open. John struggles to hold on as the vacuum of space threatens to pull him out, but he's not strong enough, and his body floats away into the void, only to wake up moments later, realizing it was all a hallucination. Franks announces it's time to execute the slingshot maneuver, and Nash pleads with John not to go through with it. Ignoring Nash, John heads to the bridge. As they activate the thrusters, the ship flies around Jupiter, but the AI reports a system overload. Franks urges John to keep going despite the warnings. Inside the hull, the unit continues to malfunction, sparking as the ship shakes violently. The maneuver is completed successfully, and the ship stabilizes, now on course to Titan. After a brief celebration, John continues with his duties, but when checking the radios, he hears a strange noise. He brings the radio to Nash and Franks, who both deny using the comms, suggesting it might have been an echo. The radar shows no signs of interference. Nash attributes it to another hallucination, and Franks orders the crew to return to hibernation. That night, John dreams about the moment he received the call confirming his selection for the mission. When he shared the news with Zoe, she wasn't happy. She admitted to breaking their agreement and falling in love with him, but John responded that the mission was more important than their relationship. Zoe then confessed that she voted against him being chosen because she didn't want him to leave. In the end, John dropped his key and walked away.
The next time John wakes up, his dizziness is worse than ever. Desperate to shake it off, he rushes through the ship, trying to clear his mind. His thoughts keep returning to Zoe, and to his shock, she appears nearby. Convincing himself it's a hallucination, John follows her. Before he can reach her, Franks intercepts him, explaining that Nash found something troubling in the reactor room and needs assistance. Franks notices John's disoriented state and expresses concern, but John snaps, venting his frustration about the agony of hibernation. After a tense moment, John composes himself and assures Franks he's fine, though Franks still reminds him Zoe isn't aboard the ship. John joins Nash in the reactor room, where Nash reports that the reactor's output is fluctuating dangerously. Although it seems minor, it could worsen, jeopardizing their mission to Titan. Nash admits he's feeling unwell and asks John to double-check his calculations before they inform the captain. Seizing the opportunity, John confronts Nash, asking why Franks seemed to know about his hallucinations. Nash denies sharing anything and, overwhelmed, begins doubting his own memories. He confesses he can't even recall his parents' names or faces. John tries to reassure him, attributing the memory issues to side effects of their medication. But Nash starts probing John's memories of Zoe, suggesting she might have moved on with someone else. Tensions escalate as John, increasingly irritated, pushes Nash away. Nash's behavior grows erratic, and he mutters about turning back. John loses patience, shouting at Nash to stop, revealing that Nash's data on the screen doesn't exist. It was entirely a hallucination. At that moment, Franks calls them to the bridge. Despite the earlier outburst, Nash insists there's still an issue with the reactor's output. Franks examines the readings and confirms the anomaly. He reveals someone deliberately issued a low-level command to destabilize the reactor, using a login link to John. While Franks suspects Nash used John's credentials, tensions explode when Franks pulls a gun, declaring they're all returning to hibernation. As John steps into his pod, he witnesses Franks strike Nash with the gun. A struggle ensues, with Franks repeatedly hitting Nash's head against John's pod. Before John can see how it ends, he's pulled back into unconsciousness. In his dreams, John revisits the night he said goodbye to Zoe. She had apologized and asked if he ever truly loved her, but he avoided the question. When John wakes again, his condition is worse than ever. His nausea leads to violent vomiting as fragmented memories of Franks attacking Nash resurface. Franks had asked John if they were still friends before the final blow. John searches the ship for his crewmates but finds no one until Franks suddenly appears. Franks explains that Nash was unstable, so he knocked him out and kept him in stasis to ensure they reached Titan safely. Franks refuses to lower his weapon, convinced John might lose control next. John insists he's fine, but Franks reveals that Nash's story about the Antarctic base was a lie. The crew there had been ordered to leave, but fear kept them from acting. Their commander had ventured out alone and succumbed to the elements, with the gunshots discovered later revealed to be self-inflicted. Declaring the mission still on, Franks sends John back to work. While checking the systems, John notices something strange. The veins in his arm appear dark and swollen. Before he can process it, his arm begins mutating. As veins burst and blood pours out, John cries out in agony, only to realize it's another hallucination. Amid this chaos, John hears voices calling his name, though the room is empty. In the kitchen, Franks comments on John's trembling hands before bringing up Zoe again. Frustrated, John tells Franks to mind his own business. Franks then drops a bombshell. Zoe and John were never in a relationship. Zoe's presence in John's life wasn't what he thought. Franks reveals that she had been assigned by the committee to monitor John's mental health before the mission. John is horrified when Franks lists every encounter he had with Zoe in unnerving detail, leading Franks to admit he had also been part of the committee. Refusing to accept this revelation, John storms off to work on the radio system. His thoughts drift to Zoe, and he begins to question the accuracy of his memories. Suddenly, a voice from Houston comes through the radio, asking questions, though they seem unable to hear John's replies. The call abruptly cuts off. Franks summons John to the bridge, furious that he thought he could contact Earth from such a distance. Franks plays security footage showing John speaking to no one, forcing him to confront the truth. To calm him, Franks shows how far the ship has traveled into deep space. Determined to avoid hibernation, John locks himself in another room, demanding to see Nash. Franks promises to take him, but as soon as John opens the door, Franks shoves him against the wall, threatening his life if he doesn't comply. John recalls what happened to Nash and retaliates, trying to disarm Franks. A brutal fight ensues, with both men vying for the gun. Franks nearly strangled John, but John breaks free, punches him, and gains control of the weapon. He demands to know Nash's whereabouts, but Franks only laughs. Feeling his grip on reality slipping, John roams the ship, haunted by fragments of memories and Frank's voice. Franks seizes another opportunity to attack, but John manages to overpower him, breaking his nose and rendering him unconscious. John rushes to the bridge, using the ship's cameras to locate Nash, but there's no trace of him. Franks reappears, and in a fit of rage, John beats him to death. Desperate for answers, John asks the AI about Nash. The AI states Nash is alive on the bridge. John demands the crew manifest, only to learn a shocking truth. He's the only crew member. His full name is John Franks Nash. The other crew members were hallucinations. Crushed by the revelation, John has a breakdown and contemplates ending it all. Instead, he turns to the radios and calls Earth. To his astonishment, Zoe responds. John confesses everything about the hallucinations and his deteriorating sanity. Zoe explains that a medical error caused an overdose, leading to his condition. She confirms that he's the sole crew member and drops an even bigger bombshell. The ship never left Earth. John had fallen asleep before launch and was placed in a facility in New Mexico minus 1,000 feet underground, designed to simulate space. It was all an experiment to study the effects of hibernation and isolation on the human mind. Zoe insists she didn't know until recently and wouldn't have let it happen otherwise. John struggles to process this as Zoe explains that the space journey was a simulation. The damage to the ship's hull had been caused by an earthquake, not a cosmic event. This earthquake also disrupted communications, preventing Zoe from contacting him sooner. Finally, Zoe guides John to the airlock, instructing him to walk through it to reach a rescue tunnel. Just as John prepares to leave, Franks reappears, insisting that Zoe's explanation is another hallucination created by John's desperate mind. John refuses to listen, dismissing Franks as a figment of his imagination. He opens the airlock, tells Zoe he loves her, and steps out. He finds himself in a dimly lit underground tunnel, with the replica ship looming above him. The ground begins to tremble, and John hears voices and machinery digging toward him. Climbing a ladder, he calls out for help. As he reaches for a flickering light, he recalls a conversation about moths being drawn to light. In a shocking twist, John realizes he's truly in space. His body is abruptly ejected into the void, leaving him suspended in the infinite darkness. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.